consider dialectal variation, right? Variation that occurs because you have come from a different background. You might be speaking a different dialect of English. So our previous input sample actually came from speech directed at children from higher socio-economic status, SES for short, backgrounds, right? Well, that's only one type of background. What about children from lower SES backgrounds? So why do we think they might have dialectal differences? Well, we know actually there are input differences. Lower SES language input can differ from higher SES input in both the overall quantity of speech and the quality or the nature of that speech, right? So quality, we can talk about it in different ways, but it's usually by measuring different aspects of the input, like say the diversity of vocabulary used. So maybe when you're talking about animals, you might only talk about kitties and penguins for lower SES, while you might also talk about puppies and monkeys and birdies and whales and seals, more diversity in your vocabulary for higher SES. By, say, diversity of syntactic constructions. So maybe lower SES might hear, say, more imperatives or more simple declaratives, while a higher SES might hear those in addition to WH exclamations, WH questions, yes-no questions, right? Diversity of syntactic constructions. Also, maybe just the frequency of certain types of speech, of, for example, decontextualized speech, where you're talking about something not in the current context. So things that are not currently there, things that are happening at a different time. Maybe you hear a certain amount of those things in lower SES speech, and you hear a larger number of those in higher SES speech, right? Different ways of looking at the quality, as it were, of the input. And there are input differences across SES, suggesting that, there are dialectal differences when thought about this way. So here's a question. Here's something we don't know, right? Do input differences impact the WH dependency distribution in a way that could affect the acquisition of syntactic island knowledge according to this theory, right? Overall number, but also maybe the types that are there. I mean, we just don't know, right? So in particular, do the input differences that are there, whatever they are, impact the WH dependency building block distribution? Remember, that's the things that this theory counts, in a way that could affect the acquisition of syntactic island knowledge. Well, let's find out, right? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to get a sample of speech directed at lower SES children. So we did this from the Child's Tree Bank, looking at speech directed at 78 children from lower SES backgrounds between the ages of 3 and 5, at about 32,000 utterances, about 3.9 thousand WH dependencies. And if in case you're curious, lower SES in this case was defined by the creators of that corpus that was part of the Child's Tree Bank, the HSLLD corpus, according to maternal education. So the moms had 6 years to some post-high school education, but no more. And annual income at the time the corpus was created, which was 70% reporting less than $20,000 a year. And then we can again look at estimates of utterances per minute, this time in speech directed at children from different backgrounds, lower SES backgrounds, to do our calculation of how many WH dependencies in that 850,000 minutes. So we have data from children from lower socioeconomic status backgrounds. And so they have a range, on average, say 13, but a range from 4.5 to 21-ish. So we have 850,000 minutes. We have our own samples of the rate of WH dependencies per utterance, about 3,900 WH dependencies and 32,000-ish utterances. This gives us our total WH dependencies during the learning period. So a little less than 500,000 up to 2.2 million, right? And here's the question again. Can the modeled child produce the appropriate observable behavior? And reminder, again, we have adult judgments, so we're looking for a superadditivity in our stimuli comparisons. And we have child judgments, where we're looking for a preferred interpretation given a particular type of WH question. And what do we see? We see for all 4 island types in learning from lower SES data, superadditivity again, right? So we have the adult behavior. And when we look at the child judgment behavior, children are preferring this interpretation, and the WH dependency this interpretation relies on is a heck of a lot more probable than the other one. In this case, 10 to the 21st times more probable. It's a lot. So the model child's going to really prefer it as well. So that's good. We have the right preference behavior, rather. And so the takeaway then is that this theory can work for learning knowledge about syntactic islands across dialects. In particular, the building blocks of WH dependencies can lead to knowledge about syntactic islands if you learn those, even when there's this kind of input variation.